You know what's strange about families? From the outside, they look so simple, so complete, like a picture framed on the wall. You see them sitting together at the dinner table, laughter bouncing against the walls, the smell of home-cooked meals drifting from the kitchen, and you think you know them. You see the boy chasing fireflies in the yard while his father watches from the porch, and you believe the love in those eyes is whole. You see the mother humming softly while she kneads dough, her hands moving with memory and comfort, and you imagine she has everything she ever dreamed of. But what I've learned in my long life is this. Families carry shadows, and sometimes those shadows are heavier than the people living under them even realize. Secrets weave themselves into the fabric of a home until one day they can no longer be ignored. My name is Shadow. I'm a dog, 12 years old now, with fur graying around the muzzle and eyes that have grown cloudy with age. I cannot chase after the cows like I used to, nor can I see the shapes of the fields as clearly. But what age has taken from me in sight, it has returned in a sharper gift. I notice things. The weight of a silence that lingers longer than it should. The shift of breathing when someone carries fear inside them. The tremor in a hand when a lie has just been spoken. Humans rarely see these things. They are too busy covering them with words, with smiles, with distractions. But dogs like me, we live in the spaces between words. We smell truths hidden under layers of fabric. We hear pain even when voices stay calm. And we sense storms long before thunder cracks. For 7 years, I've lived with this family. Martha, the mother, with her gentle ways and quiet strength. She hums while she works, always humming, like she needs music to keep the world from unraveling. Timmy, the boy, who once was so small he could barely toddle across the wooden floor, but now runs with the certainty of a child who believes the world is kind. His laugh fills this house like sunlight. And Jack, the man who saved them both. The man who arrived on a night filled with smoke and fire and carried Martha and Timmy out of destruction and into something new. For years, I thought I knew them. For years, I believed the story as everyone told it, that Jack was the hero who stepped in when tragedy struck, that Martha was the survivor who rebuilt her life with quiet determination, and that Timmy was the boy who had lost one father but been blessed with another. And in many ways, that story was true. But from the beginning, I sensed something else. A distance so subtle it would slip past most eyes, but not mine. When Jack looked at Martha, his love was strong and unwavering. It smelled of warmth, steady and sure, like the smell of bread fresh from the oven. But when he looked at Timmy, something inside him faltered. He would reach to ruffle the boy's hair, then stop short, pulling back as if burned. He would smile when Timmy laughed, but his smile always had a shadow clinging to it, as though behind the pride lived a sorrow he could not shake. Timmy never seemed to notice. Or perhaps he noticed but didn't have the words to name it. All he knew was that he wanted Jack's attention. He called him Dad with a heart so full of trust, so certain of love, that it broke me to watch Jack hesitate. "Dad, come see what I made. Dad, look at me climb the tree. Dad, can you teach me?" The boy craved sunlight, and Jack gave him warmth, but always with a wall between them, invisible yet unyielding. I smelled it long before anyone else did. Secrets have a scent, sharp and metallic, like copper pennies mixed with sorrow. They cling to the air, faint at first, but growing stronger with every season that passes. For years, I caught it on Jack, faint wisps of guilt he tried to bury beneath duty and routine. I saw it in the way he sat a little too long on the porch, staring at the horizon. I heard it in his sighs when Martha and Timmy were too busy to notice. But that night, tonight, everything shifted. As the embers in the fireplace glowed low, as the farmhouse creaked against the autumn wind, I realized the secret Jack had carried for 7 years was no longer content to remain hidden. It was pressing against him, clawing to break free, and I knew that when it did, nothing in this family would ever be the same. You see, this home has always carried two stories, the one everyone spoke aloud and the one buried beneath silence. The spoken story is simple. Jack, the hero, stepped into a widow's life, saved her son, married her, built them a new future. The unspoken story, the one I had only sniffed at the edges of, was darker. It clung to Jack's shoulders in the quiet hours. It lived in his hesitation to call Timmy son. It pulsed like an unhealed wound every time Timmy reached for him. And as the wind howled outside, rattling the windows, I knew the time had come for that story to surface. Secrets cannot stay buried forever. They either fester until they destroy everything around them, or they break open and let the truth out, no matter how painful. Tonight, the truth was stirring, and I, an old dog, sat in my corner, ready to bear witness. 7 years ago, the night of the fire changed everything. I still remember the smell of smoke thick in the air, the frantic shouting, the way flames lit up the sky. Martha's husband, David, Timmy's biological father, never made it out. He was gone before dawn broke. Jack carried Martha and her boy to safety, and from that night on, he never left. Within months, he had married her. Within a year, he had adopted Timmy. To the world, it looked like a story of tragedy rewritten into hope. But I always wondered why Jack sometimes looked at Timmy like he was afraid to get too close. Why he never called him son. Why every gesture of love came with a pause, a second thought, as if he feared crossing an invisible boundary. Humans might not notice such things, but I live in observation. I live in sense and silences, and what I sensed in Jack was not cruelty, but fear. Fear of loving too much. Fear of claiming something he believed might not be his to claim. Martha saw it too, though she never said it aloud. Sometimes I'd watch her glance at Jack as Timmy bounded into the room, her eyes carrying questions she kept locked inside. She tried to bridge the gap, urging Jack to join in, nudging him closer, creating moments for connection. And Jack responded. He wasn't cold, he wasn't absent, but he always held something back. And Timmy tried so hard. His every word, his every smile, his every small hand reaching upward was an invitation to love. But children know when someone hesitates, even if they don't understand why. And though Timmy never stopped calling Jack Dad, I sometimes wondered how long before he began to feel the distance, to sense the shadow hanging over their bond. Tonight, as I curl in my corner, old bones aching, I feel the weight of what's coming. Jack's secret is pressing closer to the surface, his silence cracking under its weight. And I know when it breaks, it will bring either ruin or redemption. But one thing is certain. By the end of this story, this family will no longer be the same family I have watched for 7 years. Something is about to change forever. The day the letter arrived, the entire rhythm of this home changed. For years, Jack had been a man of patterns. He woke before the sun, the sound of his boots steady on the wooden floors, his movements sure as he carried feed to the cattle. He ate breakfast with us, Martha humming softly as she placed eggs and bread on the table, Timmy chattering about his latest discoveries, the tree he climbed, the stone he found, the game he invented. Jack would nod, quiet but present, his rough hands resting on the table, his eyes softening as he listened. The days flowed like a song with familiar verses, never jarring, never broken. But when Martha brought in the mail that autumn afternoon, I felt the air change before anyone else did. The envelope was thick, with an official seal pressed on its corner. I smelled the sharp spike of Jack's fear before his hands even touched it. His mug of coffee paused halfway to his lips, and his face drained of color as though he'd seen a ghost. Martha set it down with the casualness of a woman who didn't yet understand the weight it carried. But I knew. I knew before Jack even tore it open. He tried to hide it, slipping the folded paper into his shirt pocket. But humans don't realize how much they reveal without words. His shoulders hunched as if carrying a new weight. His heartbeat raced. His scent turned bitter, coppery with guilt. "Just business stuff," he said, his voice carefully calm. Martha tilted her head, her brow knitting ever so slightly. "She's no fool, Martha. She notices the little things too, though she is often too kind to press them right away." But I caught the question forming in her eyes, the unease tightening her mouth. From that moment, Jack was no longer the same man. At dinner, he pushed food around his plate, staring at nothing while Timmy tried to catch his attention with endless stories. He would leave the table early, claiming chores he had forgotten, tasks waiting in the barn. But I knew he wasn't escaping chores. He was escaping the boy's eager eyes. The word dad spoken with so much love, it broke him a little more each time. Timmy didn't understand. Children rarely do. They believe love is simple and pure, and they don't yet know the ways guilt can twist a man's heart. "Dad, look what I drew!" he cried one evening, rushing to the table with paper in his hands. 3 stick figures, smiling beneath a bright sun. A family, whole and complete. Martha with her long hair, Jack with his wide shoulders, and Timmy himself between them, holding both their hands. Jack looked at it, and for a moment, something in him cracked. His face crumpled like paper burning in flames. "That's real nice, buddy," he whispered, but his voice shook, and he left the room before Timmy could ask why he wasn't smiling. The boy's joy fell into silence. I saw him sit on his bed later that night, the drawing clutched in his small hands, tears rolling down his cheeks. "Did I do something wrong, Shadow?" he whispered to me, his fingers curling into my fur. My heart ached with the weight of words I could not speak. The days that followed only deepened the silence. Jack's scent grew heavier with guilt, his movements sharp and restless. At night I found him in the barn, standing among the hay bales, the letter crumpled in his fist. His eyes were hollow, his breath heavy, his entire body trembling with a storm he wouldn't let out. Sometimes he would sink into a chair, staring into the darkness, whispering words only the night could hear. I would watch from the shadows, my old bones still, my ears straining. Every syllable he spoke carried sorrow deeper than the fields that stretched around us. Martha tried in her way. Over breakfast, she'd ask gently, her voice laced with worry, "Is everything all right, Jack?" He would nod, force a small smile, and say, "Of course." At night, she'd press harder, her tone sharpening. "You're not yourself. Tell me what's wrong." But he'd deflect, turning away, pulling his silence tighter around him like a blanket against the cold. One evening, when the tension had grown unbearable, Martha placed her hands on her hips and spoke with the steel of a woman who had carried this family for 7 years. "Jack Henderson," she said, her voice low but unyielding, "you're going to tell me what's in that letter, or so help me God?" Jack's shoulders sagged. He looked smaller in that moment, like a man cornered by his own truth. "It's about Timmy," he said quietly, still avoiding her eyes. "About his real father." The silence that followed was sharp as a blade. I heard the clock ticking in the corner, each beat like a drum against the stillness. I heard Martha's breath catch, the fear slipping into her voice. "What about him?" Jack rubbed his temples, his voice fraying. "His family. They want to meet him. They have legal rights." But I knew it wasn't the whole truth. Even with my fading eyes, I could see the way his body folded inward, the way his voice caught. There were layers beneath his words, layers he wasn't ready to reveal. The guilt clung to him thicker than ever, the shame pressing against his chest like iron. After that night, Jack retreated even further. He sat alone on the porch for hours, the letter tucked in his pocket like a curse. His silence filled the house until it seeped into every corner. Timmy would run to him, small arms eager, eyes bright with love, and Jack would find an excuse to leave. He would walk away, leaving the boy standing in the yard, confusion clouding his face. I watched from the doorway, my heart aching with every step Jack took away from him. Martha's eyes followed him too. She tried to hold the family together, tried to bridge the growing gap, but even her strength began to waver. I heard her crying quietly in the kitchen one night, her shoulders shaking as she leaned against the counter. She didn't know what she was fighting anymore, the truth Jack refused to share, or the fear that she already knew what it might be. And Timmy, sweet Timmy. He never stopped trying. He never stopped calling Jack Dad. But I could feel the shift in him too, the way his laughter carried a question now, the way his smile faltered when Jack's eyes turned away. He didn't have the words for it, but I knew what he felt. He was beginning to wonder if he had lost a father all over again. The letter lived in this house like a poison, slowly seeping into everything we once held steady. And though none of them could see it clearly yet, I knew the truth was coming. The walls Jack had built around himself were cracking. The storm was close now, and when it broke, it would either destroy everything or set this family free at last. Jack had been drinking since dinner, not his usual beer, the one he sipped slowly while the evening news droned in the background, but the hard stuff, whiskey hidden behind the flour sacks in the pantry, brought out only on nights when silence pressed too heavily on his chest. Martha had taken Timmy to bed early, sensing the storm gathering in her husband's stillness. The house settled into its nighttime quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that screams, thick, pressing, waiting. I lay curled in my corner by the fire, watching Jack sink deeper into his chair. The letter spread open across his lap like a wound he couldn't stop picking at. His shoulders slumped, his eyes dark and hollow, his breath heavy with the bitter smell of alcohol. Humans think emotions are invisible, that they hide them well, but they don't know what I know. They don't understand that sorrow has weight, that guilt has a temperature, that fear leaves a taste in the air. Jack's grief was thick as fog, cold as winter earth, heavy enough to press down on every corner of the room. Even the fire seemed to burn dimmer in the presence of his despair. You know what the worst part is, Shadow? His voice was raw, thick with whiskey and years of swallowed words. My ears pricked at the sound. This wasn't drunk rambling. This was a dam about to burst. I love that boy, Jack whispered, his hand trembling as it brushed across the crumpled paper. God help me, I love him like he was my own flesh and blood. But he's not mine, Shadow. He never was. The words hung in the air like smoke, searing, suffocating. I had suspected something like this for years, had felt the careful distance, the shadow behind his smiles. But hearing it spoken aloud was like watching lightning strike too close, illuminating truths that terrified even as they clarified. Jack buried his face in his hands, the words spilling out of him now, years of silence breaking apart. He told me of that night 7 years ago, the night of the fire, the night everything changed. He told me that David, Timmy's real father, hadn't been the man everyone remembered him as. David had been planning to leave Martha and the boy. Another woman had taken hold of his heart, a woman from the next county, a woman he intended to build a life with, leaving behind his wife and child like old furniture, abandoned in a burning house. Jack's voice cracked as he described it. He wasn't even with them when the fire started, Shadow. He was with her. And when the flames spread, when the smoke began to choke the night, he ran to save her first. He left Martha and Timmy behind. Jack's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles pale. I got there in time. I pulled them out while David was still trying to drag that other woman to safety. But the smoke got him before he could make it. And you know what his last words were to me? Don't tell them. Don't let them know I was leaving. I felt the betrayal in Jack's voice. Not just the betrayal of David abandoning his family, but of forcing Jack to carry the secret like a curse. A secret that made every moment of love feel tainted, every choice weighed down with guilt. Jack's breath shuddered as he spoke. I promised him, Shadow. I promised a dying man I'd protect his memory, that I'd never let Martha or Timmy know the truth. And I've kept that promise every single day. But the letter had shattered that fragile silence. The letter wasn't from David's family, not the way Jack had said to Martha. It was from a lawyer representing the woman David had died trying to save. She claimed David had promised her everything, that his marriage to Martha was meaningless, that he never wanted Timmy. She wanted to contest the will, to drag the past into the light, to make Martha relive a betrayal she'd never known existed. Jack's voice was low, breaking apart under the weight of his confession. I married Martha because I loved her. God knows I loved her. But I also married her because that boy deserved a father who wouldn't leave, who would choose him every single day. But now this letter threatens to take it all away. If she wins, Martha loses everything. And if the truth comes out, if Timmy learns who his father really was, Jack's voice cracked into silence. What if he hates me when he finds out I'm not really his dad? What if he wants to find David's family? What if he looks at me and sees nothing but a fraud? The words poured out of him like water through a broken dam, raw, unfiltered. Tears cut lines through the stubble on his face, dripping onto the letter in his lap. He sat there, broken, whispering to a dog because he couldn't bear to speak the truth to the people who mattered most. And that's when I heard it, the creak of a stair, that familiar sound of midnight wanderings. My ears twitched, my heart clenched. In the doorway stood a small silhouette, Timmy, barefoot in his pajamas, his eyes wide with the weight of what he had just heard. If I could have barked, if I could have warned Jack, I would have. But I was frozen by the magnitude of the moment. A 7-year-old boy had just learned that the father he thought had died a hero was a man who had planned to abandon him, that the man who raised him wasn't his blood, that everything he thought he knew about his family had just shifted. Jack didn't notice at first. He was too lost in his confession, too buried in his despair. I don't know what to do, Shadow. If I tell Martha the truth about David, it'll destroy her. She still keeps his picture by her bed, still talks about him like he was a saint. But if I don't fight this woman, she'll take everything away. And Timmy, Jack's voice broke completely. What if Timmy hates me when he learns I'm not his father? What if I lose him? Dad. The word was soft, trembling, but strong enough to cut through everything. Jack's head snapped up, his face drained of color, his eyes wild as he turned toward the doorway. Timmy stood there, small, fragile, but steady in a way only children can be when they know exactly what needs to be said. For a moment, nobody moved. The fire crackled softly, the clock ticked in the corner, and the weight of the truth filled every inch of the room. Jack's breath hitched, his body frozen, his fear raw and exposed. Then Timmy took a step forward, and another. His small bare feet padded softly against the floor until he reached Jack's chair. Without hesitation, he climbed into the man's lap, his thin arms wrapping around Jack's neck, his little body pressing close. "You're my dad," Timmy whispered. His voice was steady, clear, unshaken by the storm he had just walked into. "You're the one who teaches me to fish, the one who checks for monsters under my bed, the one who fixes my bike when it breaks. That makes you my dad." Jack broke then, not just with tears, but with something deeper. The walls he had built around his heart crumbled. The careful distance he had kept for 7 years dissolved in an instant. He held Timmy close, his sobs shaking his body, words spilling out through the cracks in his soul. Apologies, promises, confessions of love that should have been spoken long ago. And from the stairs, another figure appeared. Martha, her face streaked with tears, her body trembling but strong. She walked forward, knelt beside Jack's chair, and placed her hand on his shoulder. Her voice was quiet but filled with power. "David made his choice, Jack. He chose to leave us. You made yours. You chose to stay. That's the only truth that matters." And in that moment, as I watched the man, the woman, and the boy wrapped together in the rawness of truth, I understood something profound. Families aren't built on blood. They're built on love that is chosen day after day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. What followed wasn't easy. Truth rarely makes the path easier at first. It only makes it clearer. In the days after Jack's confession, the house carried both a heaviness and a strange lightness, like the air after a storm. The silence was different now. It no longer pressed like a secret, but lingered like a wound that had finally been opened, raw and painful, but ready to heal. Martha was quiet for a long time. She had heard enough on those stairs to understand everything. The picture she had carried of David for 7 years, her husband, her son's father, the man she thought had died a hero, was shattered. She moved through the house like a woman balancing grief and relief, mourning not just the betrayal of the past, but also the years she had loved a ghost who hadn't truly loved her back. And yet, there was strength in her now, a new kind of strength. She was not a woman abandoned. She was a woman chosen, chosen by Jack, chosen by the man who had stayed. Jack, too, was different. For years, he had carried himself with the steady weight of a man performing his duty. He loved Martha, he raised Timmy, he kept the farm alive. But his love had always come with walls. Distance built out of guilt, hesitation born from a promise to a dying friend. Now those walls were gone. The night Timmy climbed into his lap and called him Dad, truly called him Dad, something broke inside Jack. Or maybe something was finally freed. I noticed it first in the little things. When Timmy bounded into the kitchen the next morning, Jack didn't find an excuse to leave. He scooped the boy into his arms, kissed the top of his head, and laughed through tears that still lingered in his eyes. When Martha hummed while she cooked, Jack joined in, off-key, gruff, but present in a way he had never been before. The air smelled different now, no longer sharp with guilt, no longer bitter with fear. It smelled warm, full, whole. But the world beyond our farmhouse wasn't ready to leave them in peace. The letter had unleashed a storm. The woman David had died trying to save pressed her claim, backed by lawyers who cared nothing for love or choice, only for paper and property. The legal battle stretched for months, dragging Martha and Jack through endless questions, documents, hearings. Lawyers asked things no heart should have to answer. Did David ever intend to leave his wife? Was his marriage a lie? Was his son even wanted? Each word reopened wounds Martha was still trying to close. Through it all, Jack stayed. He no longer retreated to silence. He no longer let Martha carry the weight alone. He sat beside her in every courtroom, his hands steady in hers. He tucked Timmy into bed each night, no matter how exhausted, no matter how drained, whispering, "Good night, son," with a conviction that left no room for doubt. And Timmy, oh, Timmy. Children see truth more clearly than adults, unclouded by fear, unshaken by shame. He had heard everything that night by the fire. He knew the story now, not the version written in ashes and silence, but the real one. And yet his certainty never wavered. To him, there was no question of who his father was. One afternoon in court, when the judge asked him directly, "Who do you consider your father?" The boy didn't hesitate, not even for a breath. He lifted his hand, pointed to Jack, and said with all the conviction of his 7 years, "That's my dad. He's the one who stayed. He's the one who chooses me every day." The room fell silent, not because the law needed his words, but because truth has a way of silencing even the most polished arguments. The case collapsed after that. Papers and promises couldn't stand against living proof of love. The woman's claim was dismissed, not only because Jack had been Timmy's legal father for years, but because sometimes truth is stronger than law. Sometimes love is stronger than blood. Life settled after that. The rhythms of the farm returned, dawn chores, evening meals, bedtime stories. But everything was different now. Jack no longer flinched at the word dad. He answered it with pride, his smile unguarded, his eyes bright. Martha still hummed, but now her song was joined by Jack's voice, low and rough, but full of harmony. Timmy's laughter rang louder, freer, secure in the knowledge that he was not just loved, he was chosen. The letter still exists. I've seen Martha tuck it away in a drawer, where it sits among papers that no longer hold power. It is nothing more than ink on paper now, stripped of its ability to poison. Because in this house, the truth has already been spoken, the love already claimed. I think of David sometimes. I wonder if, in those last moments, he understood what he was giving up. Not just a wife and child, but the chance to be part of something greater than himself. He thought love was something you could abandon, something replaceable, something you could exchange for a fleeting promise. He was wrong. Love is not found in the woman you run toward when fire surrounds you. Love is found in the people you stay with when life burns down around you. And Jack understood that. He may not have been Timmy's father by blood, but he became his father in the only way that truly matters, by choice. Now, as I lie in my corner by the fire, my old body heavy with years, my eyes clouded with age, I see more clearly than ever. I see a family not bound by blood, but by something stronger. I see a man who no longer hesitates when his son calls for him. I see a woman who no longer carries her questions alone. I see a boy who bounds through life with the certainty that he is loved completely. And sometimes I wonder how many families live under the weight of secrets, carrying shadows they are too afraid to face. But then I remember what I've witnessed here. Secrets can destroy, yes, but they can also set you free. Truth doesn't always shatter families. Sometimes it makes them stronger, shaping them into what they were always meant to be. And so, as I rest in the warmth of this home, listening to Martha's laughter, Jack's steady voice, and Timmy's unshakable joy, I feel grateful. Grateful to have watched this family not just survive, but choose each other again and again. If you are listening to this and you are someone who has chosen to love when you didn't have to, if you are a step parent, an adoptive parent, a mentor, or simply someone who stayed when leaving would have been easier, know this: your choice matters. Your love matters. You matter. And if you are someone who has been chosen, someone who has been loved not out of obligation, but out of desire, then you know the most beautiful truth of all. Families aren't born. They are made, one choice, one day, one act of love at a time. Tonight, as the farmhouse settles into sleep, as Timmy's laughter fades into dreams, as Martha and Jack's voices soften in the kitchen, I listen to the sound of a family at peace. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole. Love fills the air now, not the sharp scent of secrets, not the bitterness of guilt, but the warm, steady fragrance of belonging. This is what love smells like. This is what family sounds like. And I, Shadow, am grateful. Grateful to have been their witness. Grateful to have seen that in the end, love always wins when we are brave enough to choose it.